Hey everybody, this is Miss Glink, and for this video I'm going to be reviewing different types of figurative language. So the four main types we're going to review are similes, metaphors, idioms, and hyperboles. So just to review, just remember the purpose of figurative language is to make our reading and writing more interesting. It helps us to visualize things. It's a lot better than instead of saying, I'm feeling really happy today, it makes it more visual to say something like, I'm as happy as the sun, or I'm as feeling as bright as the sun. It's more descriptive. And another thing to remember about figurative language is that it means something different than what the words actually say. So we'll get into that more in depth later. But the first type of figurative language I want to talk to you about are similes and metaphors. So both of these types of figurative language compare two unlike nouns, but that's about all they have in common. So a metaphor uses be verbs, and I'm going to write them onto the side here. So those be verbs include am, is, are, was, and were. So they're more direct. They go right to the point. They'll say something is or something was. They don't really beat around the bush. Now similes, they use like or as. Those are their only two signal words. And they are more indirect. So they'll say, instead of saying she is a happy lark, they'll say she is like a happy lark. So here's a couple examples of similes and metaphors. So in the top it says she is as happy as a clam. Now if you notice, oh man, there is in this sentence a signal word for both similes and metaphors. Now when you run into this, which you will, you always want to remember that the simile signal words always overrule when you see both. So in this case, they're comparing she to clam. Now she is a person, of course, and a clam is an animal. So they're both nouns, but since they're not both people, or they're not both animals, they're different. Now in the metaphor example at the bottom, you notice that it only has the be verb is. It's still comparing she to clam. However, this time it's directly coming out and saying she is a happy clam. So it's more direct, like I said in the previous slide. So I thought that it would be fun to look for examples of similes and metaphors within common songs you probably have heard. So notice I have included the signal words for both similes and metaphors, and we'll be able to use those. So at the top, we have the song Diamonds by Rihanna, and it says, shine bright like a diamond, find light in the beautiful sea, I choose to be happy. You and I, we're like diamonds in the sky. You're a shooting star I see, a vision of ecstasy. When you hold me, I'm alive. We're like diamonds in the sky. So I notice there's a lot of the word like. So what I'm going to do is, for now, underline it. So there's one here, and one there. So like I said, just because it says like doesn't necessarily mean it's comparing two unlike things. That's really important. So if I look in that first line of the stanza at the top, shine bright like a diamond. Now, I notice that diamond is a noun. So far, so good. Now, it doesn't say on the left side, it doesn't really say a noun, but this is an example of a command. So in this case, she's really telling us to shine bright like diamonds. So really, The word you is, since she's telling us to do that, we would be what she's comparing diamonds to. So since she's saying shine bright like a diamond, she's saying she wants us to really sparkle for everybody to be able to see. So this would be an example of a simile. Now if we look at this next line right here, you and I, we're like diamonds in the sky. Again, we have the word diamonds right here. And on the left side of the word like, she's giving us you and I. This time she's saying both her and all of us are like the diamonds. So that would be another example of a simile. And then at the bottom, we're like diamonds. So it's like what she was saying before. She's still comparing diamonds, but she's using we. Now it's really important to notice that we're is really the same as we are. So like I said before, even though it's really saying we are like, it's using both simile and metaphor keywords, the word like, the similes always overrule. So let's look down at the bottom at the song Everything by Michael Bublé. So this time we're going to see if we can find metaphors. So here's his lyrics. They say, you're a falling star, you get the away car. You're the line in the sand when I go too far. You're the swimming pool on an August day. And you're the perfect thing to say. So it's important to notice, and I'm going to write it right above here, that your equals you are. Notice are is one of our key phrases or key signal words for metaphors. So when they're saying your, here's my signal word here's my signal word right here. I'm going to kind of, didn't mean to erase it. Let me try that again. Gotta love technology. Okay, so right here is really the word are. And here's the word are. Here's the word are. And here's the word are. So now, I want to see that those are really metaphors. Are they really comparing two unlike things? So, I know you is a person. So that's definitely a noun. Now it says you're a falling star. Oh, wait a minute. Falling star. So really they're comparing a falling star to a person. So that would definitely be a metaphor. In the next line you have you're the line in the sand when I go too far. Oh, okay. So the line in the sand, and you could have compared line just by itself, and that's fine. But if I circle the phrase line in the sand, it makes more sense because there's lots of different kinds of lines. So that's why I circled the whole phrase. And a line in the sand is definitely it's an object, so that would be a thing, so it's a noun. So that's definitely a metaphor as well. In the next line, again we have you, which we've established is definitely a noun. You're the swimming pool. Oh, now I know a swimming pool is definitely a thing. So here's another metaphor, comparing us to a swimming pool. Now at the bottom it says, and you're the perfect thing to say. Well, we have the word you. In my opinion, it's not really comparing you to a perfect thing to say, but I guess it depends on how you interpret it. This isn't really a great example at the bottom of a metaphor, so I'd really just focus on the three at the top. Our next example that we've talked about before is a hyperbole. Now, the thing to know about a hyperbole is that it's an exaggeration that couldn't possibly happen in real life. So I like to think of the word hyper. Think about what it means to be hyper. If you're being really hyper, you're probably taking things way far. And you're probably driving your parents kind of crazy because they're like, hey, calm down. Well, when you're hyper, you tend to exaggerate things. You make it sound bigger than it really is. You have lots of energy. So at the bottom, I thought this was a kind of fun little example of hyperbole. So down here at the bottom, you have this little world that's saying, I know you've waited 1,000,000 light years to learn about hyperboles. And all these people are saying, oh, I've waited 1,000,000. No, I've waited 1,000,000,000,000, 1,000,000,000,000, 1,000,000,000,000. Well, that's a big exaggeration because, well, obviously we can't even live 1,000,000 years. So when you're saying waiting 1,000,000 light years, that's the hyperbole of that sentence. So idioms are a little bit different. Those are expressions that they really just mean something different than what the words might say. So these include really common phrases that you might hear. So when it says, this chicken down here says, don't chicken out, well, obviously that doesn't mean you're turning into a chicken. It just means, hey, don't be scared. You can do this. A fun example of an idiom could be if you're walking around the house really sad, your mom might say, hey, quit acting like the sky is falling. Well, obviously the sky is not going to fall on us, but it's a common phrase that means, hey, calm down. It'll be all right. Don't worry. So just to show you how these work in songs, if you look at the top right, we have a song by Adele, and it's called Hello. So we're going to see if we can find hyperbole. So just to remind you that these are exaggerations. They mean like you're taking something to the extreme. So here's Adele's lyrics. Hello from the other side, I must have called 1,000 times to tell you I'm sorry for everything I've done, but when I call, you never seem to be home. So we need to look for exaggerations. So I don't see any in the first line, but if you look at the second line, it says, I must have called 1,000 times. Well, do you really think she called 1,000 times? No. That would be an example of a hyperbole. She probably felt like she called 1,000 times, but she didn't literally call 1,000 times. At the bottom, you have, I noticed one down at the bottom. So it says, but when I call, you never seem to be home. That could be an example of a hyperbole because you never seem to be home. Well, never is a pretty extreme. What she's really saying is, you're not home very often, but you can't really say someone's never home. And it doesn't really mean what it says. So at the bottom, we have a song by Keane. It's called Somewhere Only We Know. And this time we need to find the idiom. So remember, an idiom is a phrase that is really a commonly used one. That doesn't really mean what it says. So here's the lyrics. I walked across an empty land. I knew the pathway like the back of my hand. I felt the earth beneath my feet, sat by the river, and it made me complete. So we're looking for a phrase that really doesn't mean what it says. It's a commonly used phrase. So I walked across an empty land. No, I can actually take that whole phrase literally. I knew the pathway like the back of my hand. Well, right there, like the back of my hand, that's a commonly used phrase that basically means I knew the pathway so well that I really didn't have to pay attention while I was walking because I knew it. It's like your hand. It does sound like a simile, but in this case, it could be used as either. But this case, obviously, you know your hand. You've had it with you your whole life. But this is just a common phrase that really doesn't mean what it says. So to leave off, I thought it'd be funny to find some comical pictures of the similes, metaphors, hyperboles, and idioms. So at the top, I have, my dog is as smelly as dirty socks. So in this case, you're using the signal words as, and you're comparing your dog to dirty socks. You're just saying, hey, you stink, you need a bath. For the metaphor example, it says, she is the apple of my eye. Well, I'm going to box in my is because that is my signal word. It's my be verb. And in this case, you're comparing she to an apple. Obviously, she's not an apple, but basically this means that she means a lot to you and you appreciate her. So down at the bottom you have hyperbole, and this one's a little bit smaller, so I'm going to see if I can do this so you can see it. We have my eyes widened at the sight of the mile-high ice cream cones we were having for dessert. Well, this one's the extreme exaggeration. So the mile-high ice cream cone. Now, if only we could have an ice cream cone that's actually a mile high. But basically, this just means that you have a really huge amount of ice cream. And then for our last example, we have idioms. And in this case, Mrs. Potato Head is telling her son, Baby Potato Head, "Don't you roll your eyes at me, young man." Well, obviously, if your mom says that to you, she doesn't mean she wants to take you to take your eyes out of their eye sockets and roll them on the floor to her. She's just saying, and we can tell, look at her facial expression. Don't roll your eyes is basically saying, it's a commonly used phrase, hey, don't be sassing me, means you're in hot water. Well, that's actually another idiom. You're in trouble. So I hope that really helped you understand the meaning of the different types of figurative language.